Greetings, all. Thank you for joining us this Saturday from NUNM. And so before we begin, just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So we will all be kind of going through little bits and pieces of the application. And today is everything you need to know to hopefully get your feet on the ground and get solid for your own application for a naturopathic residency. All of you will be in listen-only mode, so please use the Q&A box as we get to the question and answer section. This form is also going to be recorded and will likely get you the recording hopefully by Monday. If you have any issues or any questions either during or afterwards, please send an email to residency@info or residency@aanmc.org, and hopefully we'll be able to get that handled for you. So again, thank you so much for coming today. We will be covering the timeline for all of the residency application and match this year. And then we'll be doing a little bit of a demo, an experiential demo on credentialing orders and also how to apply to a specific site. And then, like I said earlier, we'll have some Q&A. So with that, I am going to stop my share and turn the reins over to Dr. Saunders. Dr. Saunders. Okay.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Mm-hmm. We could for a second. Are you there?
Okay, I apologize. My internet.
Oh, bear with us, folks. It appears we're having some technical. We can, but you're kind of cutting in and out a little bit. I know that, and I don't see your video. It just flashed in for a second and it's going away. It's gone. I know the Pacific Northwest right now is getting pummeled by an ice and snowstorm. So unfortunately, we are having a bit of technical difficulties here where Dr. Saunders is. And Dr. Garcia, are you with us? Do you have?
Yes, I'm here.
You are, okay. So maybe it's just Portland.
So while Dee's trying to get
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh yeah, Dee, we can hear you.
Okay, I apologize. The ice storm here is making things a bit unstable. So hopefully I'm going to keep my video off so that you can maybe just hear me, see the screen that you guys have, but I know this is that I'm going through. So I wanted to talk about the timeline for our application process. So the slide that has all of the date up, if that could go up for the application timeline, I just wanted to orient us to where we are in this moment. And you'll see that we're right there after February 8th. The application period is now open. So there are a couple other dates I wanted to make sure that you guys get in your calendars, the deadline for faculty evals and transcripts, the credentials orders, and then applications close on March 21st. So those are the next couple of things that will be highly important for you. The next slide, please. Navigating through the application process. Phase 1 activities was everything that we went over during our last recording session. So if you have any questions on how to upload your NPLEX or reaching out to faculty evaluators or any of those other pieces, please do watch the recording that's on the AANMC webpage. And today we're going to focus mostly on our phase 2 activities where you'll create your credentials order that contains your evals and transcripts, and then how to submit your application. We'll also go over some other fun stuff that Joanne, Dr. Yanez has already outlined in our agenda. So the next thing for us to do is a drive-through of the website. And so I'm going to try to share screen here and click continue, click desktop. Great. So now, apologize to get you all the way through. Here we go. This is what your login looks like for the application portal. In order to create your credentials order, you'll come over here to credentials. Most of you already knew how to get a evaluator request submitted. We did that in the first video, but basically you come down here, hit add new, you put your evaluator's name, their email, see if it's a transcript or a recommendation, and hit submit. So most of you have a whole bunch already listed in your recommendations pile. Once your recommendation is complete, you'll get an email saying your evaluator has submitted it. You can come back here to completed order or completed recommendations and transcripts, and you'll be able to see which evaluators have completed your evaluation and make sure that your transcripts are there. Once you have 3 evaluations and your transcripts, you'll come over here to orders, pop down, hit add new. You type in your full name, which I'm actually in a test account, but that's fine. And then I would like this faculty member. I'll hit add recommendation. I'll grab the next one, and yours will be labeled by the name of the faculty member who submitted the evaluation. These are just examples. Come down, add the third one, and finally add my transcripts. Once I have all 3 evaluations that I've selected in there, plus my transcripts, I hit submit order. And it says, are you sure? I say, absolutely. Great. Now my order is pending. I can come back and I can check and see if it's here. But the way that I'll know that it's done is by coming over to my document library, my documents. And here it is. There's my credentials order, along with all of the other documents that I've already uploaded. I have an essay packet for a clinic, one clinic that I wanted to apply to, and then maybe a different essay packet talking about why I want to work here. Of course, I'm biased. And this is where you'll find your credentials order once it's completely processed. The timeline between putting all those documents together and submitting your order and then seeing it in your documents may take up to 72 business hours. But once it's back here, you can apply. And that's my trigger to turn it over to Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Dr. Saunders. Let me just go ahead and do my share screen over here. Okay, share screen. Share. So this is one of our other test accounts. And if you're interested in applying to a program, like for example, this test applicant is interested in, first thing you want to do is make sure that your documents are all in. And the key documents, of course, such as in this candidate's file, the confidential credential file came in, and this is, of course, the file that has the three evaluations and the student transcript. And you can see for this particular candidate, because the individual is from Bastyr and is also interested in applying to other non-Bastyr sites, it just so happens that the candidate has an evaluator that's sitting on the BCNH committee. The candidate has submitted another file just to be able to apply to BCNH and to BUC. You also will see that this student is particularly interested in applying to both BCNH and BUC. The NCLEX scores are in here, which the student had uploaded. The NCLEX, of course, is a document that you've received notifying you that you've passed NCLEX 1. You've had 2 personal statements because the applicant is applying to 2 different programs. So how to apply? So go to this set of menu items, go to Open Residency, go to Search, And you may use your keywords if you want to. So let's just say Bastyr. And as you can see, these are the two Bastyr sites that that this applicant is interested in. So let's click on BCNH. When you click on BCNH, it'll open to this particular window. You'll have sort of a general description of bulleted items, or sometimes there'll be a paragraph describing what shortly what the program is all about. And then to actually apply, you need to click on this apply button. And then as you can see, let me just close that again. I'd like to repeat that step because this is a crucial step. Make sure that you hit the apply button. Make sure that this is the program that you're interested in applying to. If you're not so sure, you can also certainly download the job description or the site description. That's also available for you to review. But if you're really interested in this particular program, all you have to do is just hit apply. It opens up this window and it'll give you some drop-down menus. There's only one resume on file, so you can select that. Since you're applying to BCNH, your essay BCNH is here. Of course, we know that this candidate is interested in applying to BCNH and BUC, and this candidate happened to prepare two different essays, one for BCNH and one for the San Diego campus. So for this application, because it's to BCNH, the candidate will need to select BCNH essay. And as you can see, you're going to have to make sure that you're not sending the personal statement for BUC, which is the San Diego campus. You want to send the right essay to BCNH. So make sure that you're sending and labeling your personal statement and your essays appropriately. And then make sure that you select NPLEX and of course the credential file. Because this person will also be applying to other non-BCNH BUC residencies. This candidate just so happens to have two credential files. But if you're only applying to a program wherein there's no limitations as far as the evaluators, whether they sit on the committee or not, then you'll likely only have one. Now for this candidate, the candidate will select this credential file because that means it contains the evaluations that does not have the sitting committee member, and hit submit. Okay. So it says now you have submitted an application. It notifies you. And as you can see, once you hit submit, it'll say you've applied. Okay. So, so if you're applying now to another program, again, go to your search button. Type in Bastyr for the other side. You see, if you've already submitted an application to that site, you'll already see that you've applied to it. It's now been tagged as applied. So you can't reapply to that site anymore because you've already submitted your set of documents. Now this individual is also interested in applying to BUC. So do the same thing, click on that, hit apply, and again, go through the motions of making sure that you have your resume, your appropriate statement. Oops, you can't use this one. You're gonna have to use the BUC essay, a personal statement for BUC, your NPLEX, and of course the appropriate credential file. And then hit submit. Then it says your application has been submitted. And so if you look at your applications, you'll now see that you've actually applied now to 2 sites. And obviously you can apply to as many sites as you can. Now, in addition to applying to the different programs, also remember to make sure that you register your application fee, your credit card for your application fee. So go to fees, register credit card. And then click on this one because this is the cycle that we're applying to. And then make sure that you read this statement up here about when it's refundable and non-refundable. It's highlighted in yellow. And of course, make sure you fill out your correct information and then hit submit. Now, suffice it to say that you're only going to be charged once the application process is over. So maybe we can return back to, I'll do my stop share so that we can go back to a few other slides that I wanted to talk about.
Gary, would you like me to get the presentation back up again?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So next slide. So again, just to recap what Dr. Saunders had mentioned earlier, look at the key dates. The key dates, your faculty evaluations and your school transcript should be in by the 8th of March. You must send in your order to the committee, which is your 3 evaluations and 1 transcript by the 15th of March. And of course, you must submit your or apply to those different programs, the steps of which I had just demonstrated to all of you. It must be done on or before the 21st of March. Next slide, please. And on top of this page, of course, you'll notice that there's the application fee. Now, the application fee, you're going to be charged per site, and it's only going to be charged after the 21st of March. I know some students who will apply early, and they're wondering why their application fee has not been charged to their credit card yet, because the committee will wait until after the application deadline of March 21st. That's when we'll process everything, because we've had experiences with students in the past wherein a student would apply to a site, then would change his, her, or their mind and say, oh, I'm not really interested in the site anymore. So they'll pull back and then request for a refund. So to avoid a charge and refund, we'll just go ahead and wait until everything's all settled, because after March 21st, you've already submitted the sites that you're interested in applying to. And that's the only time the committee will charge your application fee. And it's $49 per site. And just to let you all know that after the interview process comes the match process, and that's an entirely different process in it all itself. The portal is different, the fee structure is different. And of course, the key is once you've applied, you need to make sure that you begin your appropriate preparation for your interviews. And with that, I will transfer over to Dr. Joseph.
Thank you, Gary. So after you've submitted your material, essentially what happens at that point, after the cycle has closed, your applications are going to be reviewed on an individual basis. And how they are reviewed and assessed really depends on the actual residency site. Some sites either designate a single director to filter and choose prospective interviewees. Other institutional residencies, for example, use committees or teams to determine who they think are the most applicable applicants for their respective site. A lot of crossover, however, in regards to generality of criteria includes GPA, experience in research, teaching, especially if it's an institutional or teaching residency site, leadership, clinical experience, all of that again, essentially builds your resume, builds your clinical experience. At that point, the recommendations are also reviewed and taken into consideration. And when a final list within a respective residency site is determined, those individuals will be contacted individually for the next interview process. So in our next slide, speaking to the interview process, there are still some in-person interviews occurring, though we do live mostly in a virtual age given the pandemic. So in-person interviews, we know we need to dress appropriately, be on time, be prompt, make sure you've completed the requirements, come prepared as the residency site has designated. And in this day and age, we want to make sure you're wearing a mask and you're adhering to all other safety measures that the site has put in place for you. Now, there are a number of residency sites that are conducting interviews virtually, and that tends to be more commonplace. So things you want to definitely keep in mind is that you're having a good internet connection. Mind you, this is going to be your responsibility, making sure that everything is fluid there. We know technical difficulties can occur, but you want to ensure that you've done everything possible, you've done the best possible to ensure your internet connection is fluid. So essentially what we're saying is, don't be like Dr. Saunders and live in a place where there's going to be a snowstorm during your interview process.
Thanks,
Joking
Dr.
aside,
Raskin.
of course. Joking aside, again, just do the best that you can in order to make sure that internet connection is fluid. You want to make sure your background lighting is also adjusted. Sometimes there is a glaring light and it will essentially blur your face. You definitely want to make sure your background is clean. You're in a room that looks organized, looks professional. We don't want loose clothes or garbage or things of that sort in the background. You are recommended to rehearse, and not necessarily rehearse the interview, but make sure that your connection is fluid. There is no reverberation or echoing. You want to make sure that your distractions are reduced, your door is closed, there aren't animals or people or a combination of both running in and out during your interview process in the background. So again, a lot of these things are manageable, and a lot of these things we tend to forget about. We are getting better at it now that the pandemic is extending on and on and on. But just like in-person interviews, you want to make sure you're dressed appropriately. And from my personal recommendation, you want to dress appropriately from head to toe. You never know what's going to happen. So make sure you look great from the waist up, but make sure you're wearing pants as well, plain and simple. Moving on to the next slide. And I will now turn it over to Dr. Carino.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you. So, you know, the question does come up, how do you create a new residency? Many of you have done your preceptorships and are really excited about potentially working at that particular site. And you want to encourage and cultivate a relationship wherein a new residency may be welcomed. So if there is interest, then they need to submit a universal site application. So there are a couple of ways that this can happen. You can look for the universal site application, which is a quick Google search, but you could also go to the AANMC site and you can ask the prospective site to go on there, and there's a section there where they will fill in the information, and one of the site directors will contact them and provide them with information. So they have to fill out an application, and this application is rather in-depth. And the purpose for this is to ensure that the experience that they're creating for you as a learner, as a clinician, as a naturopathic doctor, is sufficient to give you the experience that is required, and that would give you, you know, a very robust learning environment, as well as clinical environment. So once that is looked at, it is vetted, and you know, depending on the site, depending on the school that it will be affiliated with, you know, there is an approval process, and then a report is then submitted for CNME approval. It does take some time, so it takes about 4 to 6 weeks. There may be sites with a non-naturopathic doctor resident supervisor, which, you know, we've approached the CNME because these are also very valuable sites, but we don't want to lose sight of the naturopathic doctor, naturopathic medicine orientation. So the site must have a naturopathic advisor. Next slide, please. So then the question happens, you've gone through everything, and you know, you've put in your match, you've identified 1, 2, and 3, but unfortunately for that first round, you didn't match. Well, don't despair. There is a reposting of these post-match sites, and there's an opportunity to apply to some of those other sites. And some of those sites, perhaps you had ranked in the lower section, and now you want to bring them up higher. And so there is a post-match opportunity. As I mentioned, you can also build your own residency. And so in doing so, this would go into an off-cycle type of situation, because obviously you would have, the deadlines that we've been explicating here won't be able to be met, but there will be a new set of guidelines and deadlines. So if that is the case, we typically, or we usually blast an email communication about these new off-cycle sites. So please ensure that your preferences are set to receive these emails. Next, please. So this is us. And feel free to contact Dr. Garcia, Saunders, Vasquez, or myself if you have any specific questions.
Helps if I unmute myself. Thank you, Dr. Carino, so much for that, and Doctors Vasquez, Saunders, and Garcia. We also have our contact information here as well from AANMC if there's something more general in relation to the application. And now we're going to open it up to questions and answers. So I'm going to stop my screen share here and open up the questions. So I know we have been answering some questions. If you still have anything additional after we've answered a question, please pop it back in the Q&A so we can address that in more depth. So the first question is, for students who have taken NPLEX examinations, are they eligible for residency programs in Canada, and vice versa if somebody has taken CONO only and or NPLEX? So Jasmine, maybe you can start on that. We can have some others weigh in.
Of course. So it depends on where you're coming from. So first off, if you have written NPLEX and you plan on practicing in BC or any other jurisdiction other than Ontario, then that will suffice for being able to engage in a residency in Canada. However, if you plan to practice in Ontario and be a resident in Ontario, then the requirement is to have written their specific College of Naturopathics of Ontario entry to practice exams. It's very similar to the NPLEX 1 and 2, but they need to be written in Ontario. If you are elsewhere in Ontario, elsewhere outside of Ontario, and you already have a license, for instance, or are registered, because of the free trade agreement across the different provinces, you can move to Ontario for an Ontario registration, and they will accept that, but that's only if you have registration within the other provinces. I'm not sure if there's anyone else that has any other questions related to that.
Yeah, I think the students, maybe if one of the U.S. residency directors could respond, there was also the inverse of that question, if you're Canadian, and maybe we should also mention visas and such as well at this time too.
Yeah, so maybe I will finish that other part. So, if you write the CONO exams, that's generally, I believe, not accepted in other jurisdictions as of yet. So, so unfortunately, if you were to go down to the States, that won't be accepted. Although the CONO exam, because like I said, the free trade agreement, you should be able to practice outside within Canada. So that's the case. What I will say is that for our American colleagues that want to come to Canada, we would love to have you, but I will say that there are quite a bit of barriers that may prevent you from practicing. We have had US students come do our residencies, but it took a lot of paperwork, a lot of convincing of government, and a bit of morale dump to both the residency host as well as the resident. And sometimes, unfortunately, when we have residencies that are supposed to start at a certain time, and because of these barriers, they can't start at that time, then many residency hosts may need to move on to another resident. And if my colleagues have anything else to add, please do so.
Well, I'll just add on the inverse, since Dr. Yana has asked us to mention that. I just echo Dr. Carino's hesitancy in it. We have had successful Canadian citizens come to the States for residency. And we have also had quite a few that had trouble with the duration of their visa fitting to the length of the residency year. Under our previous administration, visas became a little bit more challenging. I haven't got a great signal on how things are going to change moving forward, but there was also some mutual frustration and some need to involve some legal advice at the expense of the resident and the site, just trying to preserve the time so they could stay in for another 3 months after their visa expired. So my understanding is the visa is given for a year after the school is completed, and school is completed in June. So that year then goes to the following June, but residency is October to October. And so the renewal process of the second year has been a little bit more challenging, which has led a couple to match successfully, but not finish. And that isn't something from where we sit that we're able to tell the governments what to do. So a lot of paperwork. I don't know if Dr. Garcia has anything else to add.
No, that's pretty similar to our experience also here at Bastyr. It is quite challenging, and it's really pretty expensive for students who are really interested in pursuing this. You know, it's always good to have the services of a good legal opinion from an immigration attorney, because immigration law tends to be fluid, and so only an immigration attorney will really know how to navigate the appropriate timelines to secure your visa. But yes, it is very challenging, and for the most part, it's really, you know, beyond our control. And even though you followed all the appropriate steps, jumped through all the hoops, submitted all the appropriate documents, there is still no guarantee that you're going to get your visa. So that can be challenging, really, for anybody who's interested in doing a residency without the appropriate visa requirement.
Thank you. So there's another question here. There's a few questions about March, the March sites. So when should folks expect to be contacted for an interview? Maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Why don't I kick it off, Dr. Vasquez, and kick it over to you, because I know that they're your sites. But just to speak a little bit to what these March sites mean to everybody else. So we have our match cycle that we're currently in. And then Dr. Carino also made mention of these off cycle pieces where we have postings throughout the year based on sites that reach out to us, you know, in, let's just say, November, and they're like, we're ready to host right now. So we have that situation that occurs all year. Right now, there are a few sites that are being dubbed the March sites in the Q&A, but those are only open to current licensed naturopathic physicians. And so if you find yourself in that category and you're on this call and looking to apply to those, you'll see, just like the rest of the year with our off-cycle sites, there isn't as much structure around the duration of an application cycle or the duration of an interview period. There is also not a rank process or a match process. The off-cycle residencies are similar to just applying to a job. You'll apply. When that supervisor or manager at that job gets to reviewing the applications, they will contact those that they would like to move forward with an interview. And then they will contact the person that they choose to move forward with and submit a job offer either via email or telephone. And this timeline is a little bit looser. And then instead of the rank and match, the person who received the job offer is then able to give a yes or no, just similar to applying to any other job. So the overlap of some of those sites right now makes it tricky. So I see one of the questions is specifically around, can I still apply to things that are in the match? That's going to depend how these the supervisors who have current postings for licensed physicians, how quickly they move through their application process and offer jobs. The deadline for ranking, so stepping away from these March off-cycle sites and back into the question about, can I also apply to things within the match? You can, but remember that June 11th is your day to enter your rankings. So if you've applied to an off-cycle site and still haven't gotten an offer from them, you'll have to make a decision if you also want to rank for one of these normal cycle pieces. So it's a little bit tricky right now. The rest of the year gets really easy because they're just kind of like job postings. And some folks take some time off after graduation, maybe raise a family, maybe do some traveling, and they come back and they keep an eye on these sites that open throughout the year. So that's the difference between those two. And then Dr. Vasquez, if you want to speak to any timelines that you know about your sites, please do.
Yeah, and Dr.
Thank you,
Vasquez, there's a follow-up to that question that came in as well about if you could touch on when people should have their references, when they should contact their folks, and so on.
Right. So Dr. Saunders, thank you for that, because essentially generalized the process, and that the most direct answer is that there are no hard deadlines, and it's essentially loosely organized, but still organized nonetheless. So specific to the SENM sites that are posted for the March start date, we have a close date for the cycle of the 28th, and we're looking to review those candidates and send out invitations for interviews during that first week of March, with the start date set for the end of March, March 29th. With that said, it is just your responsibility, if you are interested in applying for those March sites, to have all of your materials submitted prior to the close of the cycle, February 28th. All of those orders and those applications are going to be processed manually. So as long as all the material is there before the close of the cycle, they will be processed accordingly. In regards to having the recommendations be there in time, really depends on your timeliness to reach out to your evaluator, and then the timeliness of that evaluator to actually submit the evaluation. I recommend you start that process as soon as possible and ensure that the evaluator has submitted the appropriate documentation far prior to the close of the cycle. If you can confirm with the evaluator informally, then you can essentially guarantee or ensure that we on our end have received the evaluation and they've been processed accordingly.
Great, I hope that answers the question. So there's a specific question here. I graduated in December. It says I'm not qualified due to my graduation date. Can somebody address that, please?
See, not so sure what that means, because are you graduating in December or you've graduated in December? So if you graduated in 2020, you should be able to apply, because most of the links, most of the web announcements that were made were all geared to and dated up to July or August of 2021. So you should be able to apply. If you're having problems, my suggestion is to send an email to the AANMC, and then the committee can look at it, make some adjustments, and then reply to you appropriately.
And I would just add, please add the name of the site that is telling you that you
Right.
cannot apply. There may be a setting feature or a glitch, and we'll look into that for you.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can speak to sites in general that may have different requirements. There are some sites I know in the past that have required people to have an additional acupuncture degree or take the acupuncture board exams and so on. Can somebody speak to that?
Well, I'll drop in some thoughts, and I'm sure my peers have different experiences. I would keep an eye on the job description. The job description should have some disco balls and flashing lights around what it is that you need to have to apply. And you'll want to make sure that you meet those requirements before you actually hit apply. For example, some of them will say, for licensed graduates only, right? You don't want to apply to those right now because that you don't really qualify. Others will say in there that you need to have another specific license. But overall, you also need to make sure that you can become licensed in if it is a licensed state, that you would be able to meet the requirements of licensure. So you might want to travel over in the internet search to the license requirements of that state and see what it is that they need and make sure that you meet them before applying. That is also part of your responsibility to ensure that you could become licensed in that state. Anyone else have some thoughts?
Yes, I just wanted to reinforce what Dr. Saunders has spoken of, and I'll speak to the Canadian context. Certainly in Ontario, in order for you to be a registrant there, you need to have completed a minimum number of acupuncture and TCM hours within your educational institution or outside of that educational institution in order for you to be eligible to be registered as a naturopathic doctor in Ontario. The same can be said about BC. They require a certain number, so that limits the number of graduates from the specific schools to be able to come. I know SCNM grads are able to come, as well as the Canadian, but not all. Graduates from all of the schools are eligible to come unless they meet that minimum requirement. So for those of you that are years 1, 2, or earlier, take into consideration the jurisdiction that you really want to practice in, or if there are opportunities for electives or additional training that can help support your expanded opportunities to take on a residency in other jurisdictions, please keep that in mind. There are some residencies, for instance, that may ask you to ensure that you do the prescribing piece. So make sure that you have that in mind. Certainly, for instance, in Ontario, you can write that exam prior to graduating. So make sure that you do that if that is a requirement for the residency.
Thank you. There are 2 questions here about essays. One, are essays required for off-cycle residencies and for any affiliated residency programs or independent sites? Can somebody speak to those 2 questions?
So I'll just speak to the those that are actually applying to the that are part of the regular cycle. Yes, essays are all 3 essays must be completed. Essay 1 and 2 tend to be very generic, unless of course when you're applying to a particular site, you feel that you were able to precept there, and as you're answering the question, say, I might be able to interject a great experience that I had with that particular site to make it more unique, and that you can certainly do that. But for the most part, essay 1 and 2 tends to be very general or generic. Now, essay 3 tends to be a little tricky depending on the site that you're applying to. If you're applying to a school-based program, you're gonna have to um, you know, um, create an essay that talks about your teaching philosophy. There are questions there. And of course, if you're applying to a private-based clinic, such as an affiliate private clinic, then you're going to have to answer essay question 3B. And if you're applying to a naturopathic oncology program, you're going to have to answer the questions to the essay question 3C.
Thank you. And essays for off-cycle?
Yes, those are still required.
Thank you. Okay. Would somebody be able to describe the match process? Or would you like me to take that on? I'm happy to as well. Go for
I'll
it,
give it a
Dee.
shot. I think you can fill in afterwards. So the match, it's magical. I answered this question in the chat, and so I just part of this question, so I want to bring it back out. But someone was asking if you'll match it somewhere, just if you interview. So I just want to get that out, that you need to interview at a place in order to rank them and match them. If you have not interviewed at a place, you cannot rank and match them. But just because you interviewed at a place doesn't mean you have to rank them. And if you don't rank them, you won't match them. So, think about your interview process is, shopping around, trying to find a good fit, whether it's a partner or a good car or whatever it is you're looking for. They're looking at you, but you're also looking at them. And you may interview at some sites and realize that maybe it doesn't match what your postgraduate goals are. And that's totally fine. So once we get to June 11th, that's the deadline for your rankings to be in. And I always recommend folks to take a long walk in the woods or wherever your place of reflection is, and decide which places best fit your goals for after graduation, and maybe even your goals for after residency, which ones will set you up. Then you'll go to a matching portal, which is different than this application portal. And there will be a fee associated with the ranking process, because it is basically taken away from this to make sure that it's an anonymous and protected process. It's done through a completely different system that needs to be administered as well. You'll go to that website, you'll create an account, you'll get a MIN, which is a match identification number, and you will enter the sites that you want to rank. And then there's the waiting game. And all the busy elves get everything all settled and figure out which sites ranked this person number one and this person number one. Or if the site ranked a student number one, but that student ranked somewhere else number one and actually matched there, then this site over here would go to their second or third. So the sites enter rankings as well as the students. If you want to really dig deep into these algorithms, they are completely transparent and available to you on the document library of the portal, the application portal. If you go to the library, you'll be able to download 2 documents about the match process. One of them really gets into these algorithms. And if knowing that kind of information helps you figure out what you want to rank, then so be it. That's great. Use it. It's there for you to understand. And then on match day, you'll revisit that same portal, and this portal web address will come out much later, so it's not confusing with our current application website. So once we get closer to rank day, we'll send you the information for that. So on match day, you'll return to that same website and you'll look for your MIN, your match identification number. You won't look for your name, so it's all protected information. And you'll see what sites on that website that you match to. And then like Dr. Carino said, if you did not match to any sites, you are able to enter what we sort of dub as the second round. And just by the way, some of these things wash out. We usually end up with sites that also did not match. And by no fault of anyone, still great sites and still great candidates. And you're able to throw your name in the hat for these other sites. So that's sort of my overview of the match process. Dr. Yanez, if you want to add anything else to that.
I think you did it justice. I think just reiterating, as many times as we say this, we do get people after the fact who ask us about this, that once you have submitted that ranking form, it is final. And so please just understand, do not submit that if you are not planning on wholeheartedly going to any sites that you would be matched to. One, because it will prevent you from participating in any residencies for 2 years. And the other piece is it's taking potentially a spot away from a student who could have matched there. So that is something that we enforce. So just letting you know that. Okay. There was a question about NPLEX if they can't locate their scores. I believe NPLEX will send you a new one. Does anyone have anything to add on that?
I'll probably just say, if you don't have it, put in a request soon, because you don't want to be waiting for the 11th hour and then pressing on NPLEX to say, hey, you know, I sent it 2 days ago. The deadline is tomorrow. Where's my letter? It doesn't work that way. Please submit your request. Right. If you know you don't have it, put in a request right now. Be reasonable, so they can then turn around and send you. You know, I mean, like right now, it's a big snowstorm. If it occurs on a time that you sent on another big snowstorm, then you're done. You won't have any documents sent to you.
Yeah, I think just kind of capping on what Dr. Vasquez said in regards to professionalism. I had an old mentor who always said, being early is being on time. So think about things ahead of time, because snowstorms happen, power outages happen, things, happen. And we have over the years gotten requests, this happened in life and I can't get things in on time, and so on. And so being early is being on time, if I can just, say that as many times as possible. So request that now, being earlier with your evaluation requests and so on, recognizing that your supervising docs also are answering these for other students as well. So that is just as much as I would like to add there. Okay, gosh, we keep getting more questions popping in here. Any sites that don't have a third essay?
I don't think so. And I saw that question in there too. They mentioned CCNM in parentheses, but CCNM is a teaching school. So you would use, what is that, essay 3A? Yeah. Yes.
And let me just check on to see how it's showing up in the system. So I think that'll be helpful for me to let the CCNM grads know about that.
Great.
Okay. So what happens if you match with a site and then you don't pass your NPLEX examination?
So in that event, you are not able to start your residency, and it's up to the site if they want to repost immediately to get somebody else in, or if they're willing to wait. At least in the States, NPLEX is only offered twice a year. So people who just sat right now here in February to write the exam aren't really ready to start a residency until, usually 4 to 6 weeks after the writing of the exam, when you get the results and are able to apply for the license. In some cases, some site supervisors have waited. In other cases, as much as they really wanted to work with you because they ranked you, they often have to repost and try to get someone in there because they have a patient load that needs to be seen. So as the residents come and go each year, they build a patient load, and they're waiting for that next resident to step in and start seeing those patients and help with the business. So it sort of is up to the site. So use your summer, study, and let that not be a problem.
And just a confirmation, ND licenses can be uploaded in lieu of NPLEX scores? Correct. Thank you. All right. One of my evaluators is not getting the email. Please email us, Andrea, with that at residency@aanmc.org with the name of the evaluator, so that we can look in on the back end and find out what's happening. That would be probably the best way to go with that. Anyone have anything to add there?
I'll probably add that also make sure that you're typing in the right email address of your evaluator. Earlier in this process, we had a student mistype his own email, And so he was wondering why the system wasn't giving him an authentication that he's actually been able to, you know, so for him to be able to log into the system and into the portal. And as Connie and I were looking at it, it took us a few days to figure out, and because it was just a small mistype of one letter, and that was the reason why he wasn't receiving his own authentication from the portal. So just make sure that you typed in the right email address. I think that would be the first one. And the second one, of course, is if there's really an issue, please email to us, and then we'll sort it out for you.
I was just going to say the spam folder thing that just is also popping up in the Q&A. A lot of us, based on the email we have or where we work, we have different spam filters, and this can easily go to spam. So have them check their spam folder, or maybe resend the request and then email them from your account saying it should be at the top of your spam folder, just so they don't have to dig through all of the crazy spam that we get. But that's usually where we've found them too when I've problem solved for a couple of folks.
Thank you. And just checking all of the credential orders are the same. Same recommendations for 3 evaluators.
Well, I think that Gary, Dr. Garcia went and tried to explain this from the sense of Bastille, but I'll just kind of do a little bit of a flyover piece and say that some of the teaching schools do not allow evaluations to be submitted by anybody on the interview committee for that school. So what do you do though? You've worked with that faculty for 3 or 4 quarters. You know they can write a strong evaluation. Well, you can use it for your off-site or non-teaching, not at that institution at least, applications, but you'll have to find a different evaluator to evaluate you for that program. I think STNM, Bastille, and NUNM all share in this piece. So what does that mean? That means those of you that are doing that want an evaluator who's on your committee that you want to apply at your own home school, and you want to apply to other sites outside of your own home school, you'll actually have to get a 4th evaluator. So you guys will be sending requests to 4 people plus transcripts. And then in that case, you'll need to submit 2 orders, and we'll label them differently in the, so remember when I did my example of creating my order, it asked me for my name and I typed in my name, but I'm going to put in whatever information I'm going to need to know that that's the credentials order for my NUNM application, since I'm an MUNM student. So I would have put in D. Saunders, NUNM, and then I would select the evaluators' names that do not include the faculty at NUNM that sits on the committee, and the transcript, and hit submit. And then I would create a second order. This is just going over exactly what Dr. Garcia showed you, but just saying it in different words, create a different order that said D. Saunders, non-NUNM. And then I would be able to select that one faculty member who I think would probably write me a good evaluation because they really know me. And then both of those orders will be processed as Dr. Garcia showed. And you would see both of them then in your ability to click a checkbox and select them based on your applications. If you don't have multiple options there in the checkboxes that Dr. Garcia showed, it means you only submitted 1 order. And each order can only have 3 evaluations. It can't have more. So if you've requested it from more people, in the end of the day, we're just going to grab 3 of them and combine them with a transcript to complete your order. So hopefully that answers the question.
There was a follow-up to that. How will folks know who is evaluating the schools, or if their person that they'd like to be an evaluator sits on that committee?
I'll probably say that connect with the individual school residency directors. So for Bastille students who are going to be applying to the BCNH program, and I would encourage you to connect with me. Same thing if you're a San Diego student, connect with me. because the membership of the selection committee tends to rotate, because we'd like to give faculty members every opportunity to participate. And so just send me your questions, and I'll try to respond accordingly.
And I'll just say that at UNM, or I would imagine other schools as well, when you ask that evaluator, they're going to share with you, you know what, I sit on the committee, are you applying to NUNM? And if they're like, no, I'm not applying to NUNM. Okay, great. Like, because people ask me for evaluations, I certainly cannot fill one out if you're applying to my program. But so when I get asked, I'll say, I'm on the committee. And are you applying to NUNM or elsewhere? And they'll say, I'm applying to maybe both. I say, great, I can give you one. Here's how you create your order for your non-NUNM sites. You'll need to find a fourth person for your NUNM site. So usually the evaluator will be transparent and let you know that that's an issue, but mostly they're not advertised, and they do change and rotate so that you can't just only try to get on shifts that are part of the residency committee or have any other type of favorable advantage. So it seems like on one hand, we should just put a big billboard up on who's on every committee. But on the other hand, we don't want to create a disadvantage for folks that don't get on those shifts with those faculty.
Thank you. So one question I'd like all of you to touch on as we get ready to wrap up here. Would you mind sharing one pearl of wisdom for folks as they enter into this time of pulling together their applications? And you already heard mine. Being early is being on time. Being on time is being late. So
I was just going to say, you already got the best one. But since I've had this conversation with a couple of other students, I'll have it here. I hinted at it a little bit as well earlier. But really use this time to any site you think you could be interested. A job description is just a piece of paper. If it's marginally interesting to you, I would consider applying for it. Then you interview them during the application, or excuse me, during the interview. Find out exactly what that job entails. So as a residency director, I hear, I field a myriad of different frustrations from my residents that are scattered nationwide at different residency sites. One day I receive a phone call from someone that says, I'm doing patient care every day, for 35, 40 hours a week. I'm so behind on charts. I have no time to do anything. It's just too much patient care, right? And then I have sites where they say, I'm only seeing patients one-on-one, 2 afternoons a week. And the rest of the time I'm with the site supervisor seeing their patients, or calling back patients or filling out prior auths or processing labs. And I want more one-on-one time with my patients. These are 2 different jobs, but both of them are equally okay, right? It's going to depend on what that site's program has to offer. So do your shopping. If you want a 4-door car, you're going to ask, does this car have 4 doors, right? So if if you're really interested in learning more about the business and seeing processing labs and maybe being more involved in prior auths or care management pieces, or learning EOBs and the billing side of things, find out what the job has to offer in terms of that. Or maybe the site over here where the person's working 40 hours a week in patient care, they have a biller, they have an MA, they have everything. You don't get to learn any of that back office stuff. It depends. What are your goals after residency? Do you want to go hang your own shingle? You might want to find a site that's going to share more of the business with you. Do you want to go get a job at one of the clinics or hospitals in the town of your choice? And be super hands off when it comes to knowing coding and billing and explanations of benefits and et cetera, then maybe a site that is just more direct patient care, one-on-one, almost every day is going to be more of a fit for you. So that's my pearl, is what do you want after residency? Find a job, find a residency that sets you up for that. And ask those questions when you're interviewing, when you're shopping, so that you're happy with the car that you pick out. That's my pearl.
thank you.
I'll
Dr.
probably
Garcia.
add to that by saying that since at this stage, you're still putting together your personal statement and your essays, just make sure that you try to come up with a compelling document, you know, whether it's a personal statement or the essay questions, ask other folks to read it. You know, if it makes sense to other people, then I think you're on the right track. Because if it doesn't make any sense to some other people other than to yourself, then, you know, just imagine the committee member that's going to be reading it. Then they're going to say, wow, I'm not so sure where this is going. So they'll just put aside the your application documents. So try to come out to make sure that your personal statement is compelling, that your essays are compelling. Also make sure that it's clean in the sense of, you know, there are no typos, there are no grammaticals. You know, at least at the Bastyr committee, those are some of the things that we're really you know, looking at. And and just make sure that you label it accordingly. Over the years, you know, we've had students say, oh my goodness, I sent the wrong essay to the wrong site. What do I do now? So just make sure you label it accordingly. That's why in my example, I specifically showed an essay for BCNH and an essay for BUC because in theory, there could be some differences in examples or maybe some other type of shared background experience that would make one document different from the other. And just make sure that you label it accordingly because you're responsible for uploading those documents, nobody else. And once you submit it, it really becomes a challenge to pull it back. So just think about these things, label it accordingly, give it a name that you know you'll be able to identify. It'll usually have a piece of the site name itself. Okay, and good luck to all of you.
I'll go next. I think this will touch on what everybody else has said, but really it is to seize your opportunity at every stage of the process. So for instance, as Gary was talking about, you know, crafting your personal statement, make sure that it is crafted, and that's an opportunity for you to shine and to show who you are and where you want to go. You know, if you realize that there's a residency that you've interviewed at or that you've preceptored at that you want to perhaps change up the character of that residency, or the other way to look at it is, are there areas here that I can grow from that has something that could help me as a clinician and help me in my career as a naturopathic doctor? Just open yourself up to those opportunities. Look to see if there are other potential residencies out there, because we need more out there. So, you know, put yourself out there and, you know, spread the word around. Remember who you are. I guess my last little bit is you've got this. You've gone through naturopathic medical school. You have and are seeing patients. You've gotten tremendous mentorship. You have the competence and the confidence to be able to succeed in a residency of your choice. Find the right match, but remember, you've got this, and make sure that that shines through every step of the process.
These are all great things. I really don't know what else to add, but if I'm going to take my personal perspective on it, it would be to essentially encompass all of this and really emphasize that proactive quality of what makes you a good residency candidate. You are a good student, so are other candidates. And so we want to take this opportunity to really emphasize what makes you different, what you have done to excel. And so drawing back to what Dr. Saunders said in regards to being proactive, seeing these residency sites, taking part of these opportunities to outside of your set curriculum and program, and then to reflect those opportunities, what you've taken from them, how you've grown, what makes you unique and independent, in the respective essays, as Dr. Garcia has said. And at the end of the day, that's really going to reflect, like Dr. Carino said, who you are. And that's what really a lot of residency directors and committees are looking at. Yes, we have a great pool of great students, but what makes you as an individual the right fit for us? And you're going to find that out during the process. So it's a win-win at the end for sure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I'm wondering if you think it would be worth it to talk about maybe some of the different types of residencies, academic residencies versus more clinical. I know, Dr. Saunders, you mentioned it a little bit in people fleshing out the type of residency they want to do. But I'm wondering if maybe we could just take a tiny bit of time and talk about that a bit in more depth.
Well, I'll just expand on what I said super quick, because I talked about some offsites and making sure you interview them to see how much billing or front office time, back office time, how much of the business aspect are you responsible for, how much autonomy you have, if that's important. Sometimes people actually want to work under the tutelage of their site supervisor more closely. Others, the leash is a lot longer, and they're seeing patients on their own, and their site supervisors and down the hall seeing their own patients, and they're a little bit more disconnected, but maybe you were looking a little bit more for a mentorship. So figuring those pieces out. And then certainly for academia, if it thoroughly excites you to work with students and help them cross the threshold, be that gatekeeper as they walk across the stage and ensure we're really building a naturopathic profession with each and every student and contributing to their learning and finding out how they learn. That's a pretty important and a very unique characteristic for a teaching at residency. And if that's not how you feel intrinsically, that doesn't excite you like it excites me, maybe his teaching residency isn't the best. Also, in teaching residencies, part of your schedule, it could be not just in patient care, but you may be thrown into helping students learn pelvic exams in a gyne lab, or going to a simulation lab, or helping out in teaching or proctoring, just other academic duties that require you to refresh yourself on the material so that you could turn around and teach it or answer questions in a musculoskeletal lab, or something along those lines. So a lot more learning and refreshing and show, tell, do. If that helps your learning style, then maybe an academic residency would be good for you. But if you're just looking to see patients on your own, an academic residency may not be the best choice.
Yeah, and the one thing that I would add there too is if you are thinking about a career in academic leadership in either the ND schools and or other programs, the academic residencies are definitely a good stepping stone for that. And conversely, you know, if you foresee having your own practice, definitely, as Dr. Saunders said earlier, making sure that you get the business model of an actual working clinic is an important step to get, because the academic centers are definitely a very different operating model than a clinic that you would have, you know, in your private business. Is there any other parting words that we would like to add before we close today?
I'll probably just say that it's really important that you do your own due diligence. This is what Dr. Saunders has been emphasizing, over and over again. It's really important that you do your own due diligence. Don't rely on the write-up. It's easy to put together a few paragraphs to describe a particular site, and that's a 30,000-foot version. The key really is for you to do your own due diligence so that you get into a situation that really is a good fit for you. The last thing you want is you think you're getting to a good site, you didn't do your due diligence, you got matched to the site because you thought that, wow, this was a good site based on reputation. And then you find out it's not a good fit for me. I have a different learning style. This is not what I signed up for. Now you're stuck. So, and you'd be unhappy. So the key here really is to really make sure that you do your own due diligence. And if possible, like for example, at the Bastyr Clinic, for those that are applying to us, I always inform students over and over again. As the current residents who were once students once, I always tell them, hey, just make sure you connect with the current residents. Find out what's going on. They'll give you the more entrenched version. I could give you the nice, rosy 30,000-foot version, but they'll give you some of the challenges that they face. And I'm cool with that because it's really important that you know what you're getting yourself into. So doing your own due diligence is really important. And once you get to that point that you're really about to make a choice and submit the list for the match, really think about it, but don't wait until the 11th hour to submit your match list, because time and time again it's always been a challenge, because if you wait for the 11th hour you might get caught, because it's automated. Once it hits a particular time, it's done. It doesn't matter whether you're in the process, it's not going to save anything. It's like you never existed if you never submitted it. So those are key things to remember.
Yeah, I would just like to echo what Dr. Garcia mentioned in regards to your due diligence in thinking about the sites. In years when we have had, and this doesn't happen often, but there are times where we will have either a site supervisor and or resident where it isn't a good fit. And 99 times out of 100, it has been because there has been a lack of communication. There has been a misunderstanding of expectations, mismatch in expectations, either on the side of the student or on the side of the site. And neither one necessarily is in the wrong. It just, there were unclear expectations or things left unsaid. And so communication is so key when you're joining into any type of relationship. And so really just understanding, like Dr. Garcia and Dr. Saunders said, your learning style, what you're trying to get out of the residency, and finding a place that will best meet your needs and vice versa.
I'll just add, not to wait to the last minute, like Dr. Garcia was saying, because you could have internet problems like I had earlier today jumping on. And actually, I can think of a couple of cases that came down to the match where someone was trying to hit submit and all of a sudden they were having computer troubles, whether that was, internet or their own computer failing, and then they weren't able to enter their ranks. So certainly don't wait to the last minute. Take your long walk in the woods, figure out what you want, and then rank with confidence.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone taking time this Saturday to speak all things residency application. Thank you to the residency directors and to you all students here or graduates. Again, this is a really valuable and important part of what we do here at AANMC. And so I just appreciate everyone taking their time to help us have a successful residency year. So with that, we will close this out. As I said earlier, we will have this recording hopefully by Monday or so, and very much appreciate y'all coming. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Best of luck.